Doo-doo-doo-doo. Check. Check. There we are. Nice to see you all. Good to be seen. The alternative sucks. Welcome back. My name is Dean. Nice to have everybody here today. Busy show. We got lots going on. The world doesn't stop. So we got to talk about some things like a Trump tape. We got a new mayor in the city of Toronto. We got Bell Media that has just basically said, we want out of the media business, and a few other things, including the death of radio. And to join me today to talk about those things and much more on a special Tuesday edition of this program, please welcome radio legend, columnist, journalist, my friend, and soon-to-be podcaster here at crier.co. Please welcome back to the program, Mr. Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you, Charles. Good to see you.
Who plays the? Can I start with a question? Or do I have to do all these
please.
niceties? Good to see you. And we don't have to do that.
No,
okay,
okay.
We're buds. We're partners.
Pals.
Who plays the harmonica? Or is it a mouth organ? Do we call it?
Yeah, that's what he calls it. The lip organ, lip harmonica, Lachlan Cross. Excellent harmonica player. And you know how rights work in this business, right? You know, rights work from music industry. You got to pay someone to do it. I'm like, you just did it for free. So there we go. We got a free harmonica.
So Lachlan, who used to be a hell of a communicator, is still pretty good on the mouth organ.
Yeah, excellent. Like unbelievable on the mouth organ. He's gotten on stage and played with some people. You would love him. He's one of those guys that you can give like 34 beers to, and he gets better at it. By the way,
wow. No, I really like what he did, and I love the price.
Yeah,
it's
free
a good price.
It's a radio thing. It's a radio price.
You're worth at least a nickel. You're worth at least a nickel more than what you charged my friend Dino.
Well, dude, do you know this about radio people? Like specifically back in the day, Charles, you did it for like 40 years. You're top of the game, nationally syndicated host. Charles Adler's podcast, which you're going to get to, is coming to Crier Media this next week. So we'll chat about that. But in radio, there's this thing, and I had this saying is like, if it's free, it's for me. Because back in the day, do you remember the free stuff you used to get when you were on the radio? It was like, you'd do a show, and after your show, you'd have like, $500 in groceries, an Xbox, and a new stereo waiting for you at the front desk. And you're like, this is a great industry.
There's almost, I guess I can say it now because it's been a few years, but outside of rent, and maybe even rent, but seriously, outside of rent, I don't remember paying for very much. I don't want the CRA to do an investigation here, because I must have paid for some things.
Yeah.
But I just remember that it didn't matter where I went, where I drove. There was always someone wanting to be generous with me, and not all these people, just in the interest of honesty, not all these people were good people. You got, Trump says they're all, they're fine people on both sides. Well, yeah, there were fine people out there who wanted to be generous with me. But when you get the media light on you, the cameras and the microphones and the access and all the rest of it, some people who are not fine people do want to treat you generously. And so sometimes you have to be careful. Sometimes you have to get professional investigators involved in checking certain people out. So some of our, I'm not going to name them, of course, but some of our brothers and sisters in public communications in the States and Canada have probably made a few mistakes in accepting generosity from some not so good people.
Yeah, they have. And it was always one of those things, position that you'd be in where you'd finish a show. Someone will go, hey, listen, I just brought you these suits. I just wanted to know if you wanted these suits. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, I really want the suits, but I don't know where you're from. And I don't know what I'm going to owe you after this. And I remember at one point, we did a card deal. I did a card deal with a card dealer here in Toronto. And I'm like, so you're going to give me 2 cards. This is a true story. You're going to give me 2 cars. You're going to pay for the insurance, $407. Give me a gas card and everything. And all I have to do is show up here once a month. And he's like, kind of. And then he goes, come into my office. So I went into his office and I'm like, okay, what's the deal? What do I have to do for these 2 cars? Because you and I both know, right? In that industry, specifically in that day, if you had some cachet, what they would do is they would say, hey, I'll give you all this stuff, but there's a little persona non grata thing here. There's something I need you to do, quid pro quo, but we won't talk about that now. And the quid pro quo is always so much worse than the things that you got. You're like, I can't do that. And I won't tell stories about getting into those situations. But in this case, I walk into this gentleman's office and he turns around and he grabs me by the lapel, right? You just imagine where he's from. Grabs me by the lapel. And he's like, Dean. I said, yes, sir. He's like, just never say no to me. And I'm like, it's pretty open-ended, dude. Like, I don't, what do you mean? What do you mean? Don't say no to you? He goes, just never say no to any of my requests. And I'm like, you know what? You can have these cars back. I'm not interested in that. But there was a real moment there where I'm like, ooh, what's he going to ask me to do? Is it going to be sexual of nature? Is it going to be like, do I have to like mule drugs across the border in like door panels? Like I was starting to think, what do I have to do for this guy? And so I handed him the car keys back, and it was hilarious because that car dealer guy, I told him the story 2 days later. He goes, dude, I'll just give you 2 fucking cars. Don't worry about it. You don't owe me anything. And I'm like, great. So I got 2 cars out of the whole thing. But there was a moment there. There was a moment where you're like, ooh, what do I do?
One of these guys, we'll just call him Johnny Lapels, okay? Because based on what you were saying, same thing. And I'll call him Johnny Lapels. That way, everyone is protected. Although Johnny Lapels, for all I know, is in 3 different dumpsters right now. But with all due respect to Johnny, I remember him saying to me after offering me the same kind of thing that you were offered. All you have to do is pretend to be my friend. So he would want me to show up in certain places with him and pretend to be his friend, So there, I had the choice. I could have the vehicles and basically be a male escort. Or I could find some other way to have access to motor vehicle transportation, and there's always a better way.
Yeah, there is, other than the open-ended, just never say no to me, because you never know what that request is going to be. And I know there are certain things I am just not capable of, Charles. We'll get into kind of media and those things in just a minute. We'll talk about Bell, and we'll get into what that whole world was like as opposed to what it is now. But we got a couple other things to deal with. Trump tape, I want to get to that.
Yeah.
But we got a new mayor in the city of Toronto. You and I were talking about that yesterday. And it was a day yesterday. 102 people ran for the mayor of Toronto, 102 candidates, one winner. It was Olivia Chow. Olivia Chow is a very hard left-leaning former NDP member of parliament. This is former Mayor David Miller, who's a buddy of mine, who said the whole country should wish her well. And this is an interesting wrinkle. We'll get to all the candidates and what that says about municipal politics or politics in Canada. But I just wanted to set this up with a couple of things, is that we're setting up for a fight. And this is going to be interesting because the entire city of Toronto, or the entire province of Ontario, is run by a conservative kleptocracy. That's what it is. And so now we've got the biggest city being run by someone who has a complete opposite perspective. She is more socialist than anybody on that side is fascist, if you want to use those words. That's just before
we do. I don't mean to interrupt. It's just I just want to once again keep my my back end safe. That kleptocracy that runs Ontario, would any of them be people who I have pretended to be friends with for 10 or 20 or 30 years? Most of them. I just want to know whether I'm enabling something nefarious here.
No, they're mostly the guys you used to hang out with. Yeah, it's all those guys.
Okay. Well,
plus some of their friends.
Hey, thanks a lot, bud. And you claim to be my partner. Okay, go ahead.
I totally am.
Yeah, okay. Ontario's run by my former associates. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the narrative is kind of delivered by your former associates. The people that are in Ontario. Dude, you know how Ontario is. It's a conservative-run province. It is run by the construction industry. They get what they want anytime they want. And then you've got a very left-leaning mayor of the city of Toronto who starts on the 12th of July. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the actual race? What are your thoughts on what is setting up here in the province of Ontario? Charles Adler, I'm interested.
Well, here's what I don't understand. I mean, just the politics is, first of all, I'll get the personal stuff out of the way. Jack Layton was a friend of mine. He didn't pretend to be a friend of mine. I didn't pretend to be a friend of his. We were friends, and Jack didn't mind the fact that I didn't support the NDP, and the fact that I didn't vote for the NDP. We were friends anyway. He was one of these people who actually practiced, I guess, by partisanship. Jack had friends who were conservatives, like his late father, who was a member of the conservative government of Brian Mulroney, and Jack Layton was, I guess technically he was a socialist, but he was a kind of socialist that had a sense of humor. And one of my major beefs with socialism has nothing to do with the fact that they want to, to sort of devour the oxygen of the private sector, without which we don't have social programs. And it's not that I'm on the opposite sides of them on many things political. My real problem with hardcore socialists is they have no sense of humor. And I have trouble having any connection with people who have no sense of humor. Even the guy who wanted me to be, to pretend to be his friend and basically own me, even he had a sense of humor. So the thing is that Olivia Chow is somebody I know personally because I knew her husband very, very well. And so on a personal level, I'm very happy for her. I don't think I would have voted for Olivia Chow had I been living in Toronto, because I just don't vote for that side of the aisle. And as far as the Conservatives are concerned, I mean, for a group that is basically running Ontario, I'm just blown away by how incompetent they were in this municipal election. I mean, if they really care deeply, they would find a whole lot of people center left to run against Olivia Chow. Instead, they had a bunch of people who were, center right and a bunch of nobodies who I'm sure they weren't in control of it all. But all I'm saying is if this election meant something to them, it was important for Doug Ford's people, as it were, Ford Nation. It was important for Ford Nation, for Toronto to stay out of the hands of Olivia Chow. It would have been very, very easy to do that by just running some left-wing stiffs against her. And some people say, oh, Chuck, you're not looking at this carefully. There were a couple of left-wing stiffs in there. Well, they were such stiffs that they couldn't manage to pull any votes. So if you cannot split the vote of the left in Toronto, you're going to get a left-leaning mayor. And it doesn't matter how many years I've spent in Toronto. It doesn't matter how many years I've spent away from Toronto. This, to me, is really simple.
What does it say too? Like, because that's what I wanted to ask you, right? Like, left, right. I try to stay away from those things, but you can't avoid it in this conversation because of what we saw. But in your mind, and you watch people go through cycles, right? Where it's like, oh, we're going to vote this party in because we're so sick of that party, et cetera, et cetera. Was yesterday's win by Olivia Chow? Did it say anything about fatigue in this province when it comes to that top-down conservative attitude to you?
No, I mean, she won about a third of the vote. And as I say, she won a third of the vote because there were no real left-wing players up against her. Look, I sometimes hate to use the left-right label, but for the purpose of this election, I mean, I have to do that. There were a significant number of people in there who were, I'll call them center-right. So they're splitting up the vote. So if you're Ford Nation, if you've got any sense of organization at all, you're trying to keep some of those people out so that you've got a relatively moderate, somewhat right of center candidate who can be strong. I mean, I'll use John Tory as an example. In the last number of years, my conservative friends, of course, don't think I'm a conservative, don't think John Tory is conservative. I want to put that aside. I'll just talk about, traditional kind of Bill Davis conservatism, okay? And I realize some people watching, listening to this, can't even remember who Bill Davis was, but it doesn't matter. Bill Davis was the conservative in the 1970s who took me, a liberal out of Montreal. I moved to Toronto and I became a conservative. To me, it was no difference. There was no difference in those days between the Ontario PCs and the federal Liberals. As a matter of fact, I think that at one time the Ontario Liberals were to the right of the Bill Davis Ontario PCs. The point is this: if the big blue machine, which is what the PCs were called under Bill Davis and Joan Rowarts and others for decades, if that big blue machine that really ran Ontario, if they were still in place, if Ford Nation was anything like the big blue machine, they would have done a better job in Toronto of getting a center-right mayor elected. So to me, Olivia Chow deserves congratulations on a multitude of levels, and I'm happy for her personally, but she won because the Conservatives did not have their shit together.
I would agree. And it hasn't stopped these people from, well, the Conservatives also didn't see it coming, right? Because John Tory got caught with Dickgate. So you remember that?
Yeah. Hard to forget the elephant in the room, as it were.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that, right? Because he, for lack of a better term, fucked his own party. Like, John Tory, and I know John well, and I tread lightly when I talk about this topic because was a good friend of mine. We have a very different opinion on, politics. We have a very different opinion on virtues and values, but we share some similar values and virtues. So I will say that we don't share the values and virtues that got him fired from being the mayor of Toronto. But, John Tory is a man with means. John Tory is a very wealthy individual. John Tory chose to bang a staffer And then the embarrassment led to him resigning, and all of a sudden we get this by-election. This was largely like a $20 million affair that the city of Toronto and taxpayers had to absorb, right? Like, it's part of this is his fault, if you will.
I don't know why John doesn't pick up the tab. I mean, how difficult could it be for John? Especially, you talked earlier about Doug Ford's friends and the construction industry and all, people who have an interest in having a right of center premier, right of center mayor. Okay, we understand. We know what you're talking about. Are you telling me that John Tory doesn't have friends with means? I mean, outside of his own family, friends with means who could pick up a $20 million tab? I mean, seriously, I'm so tired of hearing about all this honor. He's such an honorable this and he's honorable. The honorable guy, as you say, bangs his staffer, costs the city of Toronto $20 million, and stiffs the city of Toronto, right? It's enough to. It's one thing to stiff the staffer. It's another thing to stiff the entire population. If John Tory wanted to, he could pick up the tab for this election. And I think that if we're talking about the guy being honorable, if he wants to be honorable, let him do the honorable thing. Pay for this thing.
How come we're not talking about that part of this? How come no one's talking about that part of this? Like, you and I talked about it yesterday. We're talking about it today. And we're talking about the idea that a guy couldn't keep it in his pants, and it's cost the city of Toronto literally $20 million and all kinds of stress. And now all of a sudden, we're dealing with a guy. And then John Tory puts out a thing. He's like, I just wanted to tell Olivia Chow, great job, and I'll be working with you. No problem. It's going to be great. This is like 5 days after he actually said, hey, listen, don't vote for Olivia Chow, vote for somebody else. So, like, what do you make of that whole thing? Because no one's talking about it.
Well, I just don't understand why John Tory, despite everything, and believe me, I'm not moralizing here. This isn't personal, John. We know each other. This is just business, okay? And I don't like the idea. This has nothing to do with you and me. This just it's the general kind of media thing in the Toronto area. For some reason, there's almost nothing that John Tory can't do where a whole lot of the usual suspects don't end up saying, oh yeah, but he's still a good guy, still an honorable guy, still a decent guy. Well, fine. If you want to be an honorable, decent guy, pay for the damn election. Never mind the fact that all kinds of stuff may go on in Toronto for the next couple of years, which costs Toronto taxpayers a lot of money, because we know that if Olivia Chow is not just an opposition person, because she's terrific in opposition, and it's great to have a strong opposition, blah, 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 but it has nothing to do with governing. And when certain people are involved in government, they have a habit of saying yes to everyone with a sob story. And I don't care whether you're running a city like Toronto or something much smaller like a Barrie. There are always people coming along with sob stories, and I'm not trying to put them down. They're real stories. They're real sob stories. And if you really want to help them, you can access money. And I'm not talking about GoFundMes. I'm not talking about getting private people involved. I'm talking about giving them government money. And if that happens, and Toronto's already in a deficit, but if all kinds of people end up getting government money, then not only did it cost the city of Toronto $20 million to have an election because John Tory couldn't go find a professional to do his business with. He had to use a staffer.
Hooker? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about hookers, escorts. I don't care. There are, if John Tory sees himself as a professional guy, everyone calls him an honorable professional guy. Well, he's an honorable professional guy. He would have found a hooker, okay, a professional. Yeah. Anyway, he didn't do that. He cost the city of Toronto $20 million, and God knows how many millions more, maybe another 20, another 40, another 100 million, because the city will be in the hands of someone who is not what one considers to be fiscally responsible or certainly fiscally conservative. And I'm not saying anything behind Olivia Chow's back that I wouldn't say in the same room with Olivia Chow. Olivia Chow is not a fiscal conservative, and maybe that's exactly what Toronto wants. Maybe they just want money to be spent like drunken sailors, whatever analogy you want to use. Maybe people in Toronto would feel that's a good thing. Maybe people in Toronto want to have a new municipal sales tax, or God knows how many taxes, because when you're in charge of government, you can put all sorts of, you don't have to call them taxes. Dean, what's the favorite language of people who want to just make everything more expensive? There's another word that's often used, right? It's not called a tax. It's called something.
Yeah. Asshole. Cheap asshole.
There can be higher restaurant taxes and all kinds of things, whether they call them taxes or not. The point is, Toronto is already very expensive.
Yeah.
Toronto is already not terribly affordable for all the new Canadians who want to live in Toronto but have to live
It's a
2 or
nightmare.
3 or 4 hours outside
Yeah.
Toronto. Well, all of that stuff could get much, much worse if you don't have the city governed by people who are fiscally responsible. I'm not here to bash Olivia Chow. I want her to prove me wrong. I want her to be fiscally responsible or fiscally conservative, whichever language appeals to you. But I want her to be able to pull off all those things. But I will be shocked, I will be stupefied and stunned if Olivia Chow, because she's got a huge heart, much bigger than my heart, much bigger than Dean's heart, much, much bigger than John Tory's heart. And I love her for having a big heart, except if the big heart is costing the people of Toronto, and therefore, frankly, the people of Ontario and the people of Canada, that's just the way Canada runs. If Toronto does incredibly well and is run in a fiscally responsible way, it is good for the entire country. And if it isn't, it isn't.
So I would say this about that is, to your point, if I'm going to play devil's advocate, Toronto is running a massive deficit. Violent crime is up like 35-40% across
Correct.
the board. And that is a conservative, not just conservative leaning mayor. That's a super conservative, super connected to the Conservative Party mayor, right? Like that is so when we're talking about fiscal responsibility or law and order, I would point to the idea that it's not happening here still. It's not
No,
happening here now.
all I'm saying, I'm not defending what's happening. I'm just saying it could get a lot worse, and I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping it gets a lot better. Can you give me any examples of any program that Olivia Chow and her friends on council have on the whiteboard right now that would give you the impression that if they run Toronto the way they want to run Toronto, crime will come down? I mean, is there anything I'm missing here?
No, I haven't seen anything. And I to be fair, I wasn't super invested in the mayor's race because I have fatigue when it comes to 102 candidates trying to vie for one seat, and each one is just as dumb as the next. Because in my opinion, which matters for not, which is why we saw 102 candidates, Charles, is that politics is no longer for our best and brightest. Like that would dictate. And let me just kind of bring this to your attention, okay? Let's have a look at career politicians and how they did against a complete degenerate waste of oxygen named Chris Sky, okay? The anti-vax guy. Let's have a look. Not great. Chris Sky pulled 1.1% of the actual vote. In and around that were career politicians Josh Matlow, Mitzi Hunter, Chloe Brown, Brad Bradford, Anthony Perusa, this idiot Anthony Fury, who started out as an actor, decided to become a journalist, and then got into the mayor's race. Like, these are people who are, by and large, just career grifters who've decided, I'm going to take a shot at the seat and see what happens. But, like, didn't that strike you during this election and in all elections, the quality of individuals who just go, I got a shot, it's going to happen, right? Like, what the fuck is that?
I don't know. I can tell you this, and I'm not happy about this, but it's true. I didn't know until the pandemic. I guess I should have done better homework, more homework. So this is as humble as I get. But I found out during the pandemic that the quality of humanity in our country is not what I thought it was. There's a great big oak barrel of fools that I didn't know they existed. And they're around, and they've got more access now to media. So they've got more power. They get involved in mayoral races and other races, and I feel badly about not having done enough homework and not knowing that we had as many dummies in this country as we clearly have. And because I always speak the truth as I know it.
Sure.
If you're asking me, it's not just a Toronto thing. It's a Canadian thing. It's a North American thing. We Canadians are wonderful at dumping on the U.S. Republicans and some others in the right-wing ecosystem in the States who come across as complete morons. We have our share of morons, and I don't think that being Canadians and being modest with our criticism, I think we've given them largely a pass.
Yeah, I do too, and I think it leads into kind of the other question. I don't know if you watched CNN yesterday. They obtained the Trump tapes. I think by and large, a lot of these idiots, like I watched a lot of people get really racist about Olivia Chow and openly racist about where she's from. Like this gentleman, Nick LaGrange, to know the bright future Toronto has in store under communist China operative Olivia Chow. Just take a look at San Francisco.
Oh God.
And it's like thousands and thousands of those tweets. But by and large, those people were relegated and now they're out and they're open. And I believe it's Donald Trump's fault. I believe he gives them oxygen and a place to hide in his shadow of idiocy. But I do want to point this out is that it's amazing to me, and we'll get into this tape in just a second, but it is amazing to me that so many people are so weak-minded that they have to hide behind that guy.
I don't know. All I know is that right now, the people who fancy themselves as right, including, of course, the people who run the Conservative Party of Canada, they keep talking about ethics, and they always want to question Trudeau's ethics, Liberal ethics, NDP ethics. But I mean, what is ethical about stealing and lying all day long? I mean, whether they're watching Fox or they're online with their favorite right-wing commentators, they just steal every single line, they steal every single slogan, and they apply it. I mean, everything that's being applied to Olivia Chow right now from people who, as I say, see themselves as far right wingers, everything is an imitation of what right wingers say about liberals, about Nancy Pelosi, about San Francisco. I mean, these conservatives are just kind of cutting and pasting and lying their way through life, and then getting on their high horse about how honorable they are or how dishonorable the other side is. It doesn't take much brain power. And it doesn't take a moral compass to cut, paste, and lie, which is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and here's the other thing. And when they get caught in a lie, as we'll play on this tape, when they get caught in a lie, they're like, "Oh, that's not real." Like, dude, this is the narrative, and I'm gonna play this for you. CNN put out a Trump tape. Trump literally talking about and showing people these classified documents that he stole, talking about how classified they were and that he has them. Let's listen to the tape, and then we'll get into that.
True confessions from the Donald.
Yeah, here we go. Let's have a listen together.
These are bad, sick people.
That was your coup, against you.
It started right at the beginning.
Like when Millie's talking about, you were going to try to do a coup. No, they were trying to do that before you even were sworn in.
That's right.
Trying to overthrow your election.
Well, with Millie, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him.
Wow.
We looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case,
Mm-hmm.
Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. You attack, and
Hillary would print that out all the time,
she'd send it. No, she'd send it to Anthony Weiner, the pervert.
Please print.
By the way, isn't that incredible? Though?
Yeah.
I was just saying because we were talking about it, and he said he wanted to attack Iran and what. These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out
See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, it's so. We here and I have. And you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
it's incredible, right?
No,
hey, bring some Cokes in, please.
Bring some Cokes in.
Cokes, Mr. President, Mr. Cokes.
So in that clip, then that landed yesterday. CNN obtained it, put it out. Everybody went nuts. He's trying to say, see, I didn't say anything wrong, but clearly everything in there is terrible for him because he admitted to everything. So your thoughts, and I don't know where you want to start, but that is big.
Let me start in a place. I always like to start in a place that nobody else seems to be starting in or finishing in. Otherwise, what's the point of having me on? So when Donald Trump talks about the military this and the military that, guess who's the commander-in-chief? Guess who was the commander-in-chief when those documents were being prepared? Well, of course, it was Trump. So Trump is trying to portray this in this meeting at his golf club at Bedminster in New Jersey. He's trying to portray this as the generals are trying to stuff a war down Donald Trump's throat. The reason those documents were prepared by the Pentagon, and Milley being the chair of the Joint Chiefs, is because Donald Trump wanted to go to war with Iran. Okay. At least Donald Trump wanted to have a plan in case he did want to go to war, and that's why those documents were presented. So Donald Trump always portraying himself as the victim. But beyond that, the most important part of this, as far as the trial is concerned, is this is Donald Trump confessing. This is Donald Trump being in the witness box, which, of course, no lawyer would ever want his accused to be. They try to keep you out of the witness box because under a withering examination from the prosecutor, Donald Trump would simply die. But this is Donald Trump in the witness box testifying against himself. He said he didn't have the secret documents. He even told Brett Baer of Fox that just a week ago. He said they weren't documents. They were just kind of newspaper clippings. Well, they weren't. They were documents. So he admits that he's looking at documents and he's shuffling.
And admitted that he can't declassify because he's not the president anymore. So we knew. Admits
that they're secrets. Now, for the first time, I guess, publicly, he admits that, I guess, he lost the election because for years he tried to say that he was still really the president, and he had all those people saying there's only one president. It's not Joe Biden. It's Donald Trump. Okay, so here he's saying he's no longer the president. Here he's saying that they are top secrets. Here he's saying that he's not really allowed to be talking about this. So, there's this term, without getting into the weeds here, there's this term called mensa rea. It's an old Latin term, and everyone who cares about the law, probably even in the old Soviet Union, probably even Putin's people know this term, mensa rea, and it means criminal mind. So in any kind of criminal trial, no matter what the charge, you have to prove, and this is what's sometimes the toughest to prove, you have to prove that the person who you're accusing of having committed a crime had a criminal mind, knew that he was committing a crime, mensa rea. And here's Donald Trump, room service, okay, delivering room service to the prosecution. This is the United States versus Trump. He's delivering to Jack Smith, the prosecutor, room service. He's basically saying, yes, of course I had a criminal mind. Yes, I knew they were classified. I said so on tape. Yes, I knew they were top secrets. Yes, I knew that I wasn't the president. Yes, I knew that I didn't have the right to declassify anything as a non-president. I mean, he's just giving them everything that they want. Nobody can say that Donald Trump didn't know that what he was doing was wrong, because not only did he know, he's bragging about it.
Yeah. Oh, dude, bragging about it, showing people, bringing people into his office, saying, look at this. It's incredible that I have this. It exonerates me totally. But I can't be showing you this, just so you know it's secret and I'm no longer the fucking president. And that is the whole premise behind his indictment. Like the entire premise, right?
And by the way, he knew that he was on tape. There's evidence of that as well. That this tape, I mean, some people call it a secret tape. Well, I mean, it was kept secret from some people, even though all kinds of people had dubs. The people who were in the room had dubs of it, and all kinds of dubs got out. It's very, very difficult to keep anything a secret, really. But Donald Trump knew that he was being taped. And Donald Trump said this all on tape. So beyond everything else, I mean, the arrogance of this serial liar, unprosecuted criminal, okay, to be saying all of this and to be saying it on tape, I guess, daring the system to go after him. And remember Gary Hart years ago? Yeah. He was daring the media to come after him?
Yeah.
So
had the affair on a boat?
Gary Hart was running for president. He was a Democrat. He was a senator from Colorado. And there were some people who thought that Gary Hart might be doing a bit of a John Tory. And he said, yeah, you can follow me if you like. So they followed him. So they followed him to a yacht. Yeah, he was on a yacht. It was called the SS Monkey Business. And he was doing monkey business right on the yacht. Oh, yeah. And his career went up in smoke.
They even got his ass on camera, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's one thing to do stuff that you're not supposed to do. Yeah. It's another thing to tell the media or the government to to come after you. So he told them to come after him, and they did, and he's done. And of course, a lot of people in the political world say, well, so what, Dean? I mean, so what, Chuck? He can still run for president. The Republicans can still nominate him, and he can still be elected. Now, I'm trying to get my arms around this one. I don't know whether he can be in the Oval Office and in a prison, a penitentiary at this. Like, I don't know. Does he do
Same time.
day? Does he like is he in Leavenworth during the day and the Oval Office at night, or the
I don't
Oval
know.
Office by day and Leavenworth at night? Does he sleep at the White House, or does he sleep in the pen? I'm not sure, and I don't know if anyone actually knows the answer to that. But I guess that's a question that we'll have to deal with.
And another question I would ask too is, like, you know, I'm old enough, as you point out, to remember when an affair would be seen as, oh, you can't run, you're an undesirable individual. I mean, this gentleman, you know, still holds the weight of the entire Republican Party on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And he has been charged and indicted with being a fucking traitor, like a seditious traitor who stole and maybe sold state secrets that were bought and paid for by the deaths of hundreds of thousands of men and women over the years.
Well, the lawyers, his lawyers still have not been able to recover the documents that he's shuffling on that tape, which is almost 2 years old. So we don't know what happened to those documents. And for all I know, Putin has seen them, Xi has seen them, Iran has seen them, Saudi Arabia. I mean, those things are worth real money. I mean, these are secrets involving a possible attack on Iran. That's worth a lot of money to a lot of people, including, of course, the Iranians. Despite all the sanctions and whatnot, the Iranians and the Iranians who need to know have access to a lot of money. And I have no idea where some of that money may have gone. But would you be surprised, Dean, if Donald Trump or Donald Trump's family has already benefited from selling secrets over the last few years? I mean,
well,
he may have. I don't know.
Dude,
Jared walked away with what, $2 billion? The Saudis invested $2 billion in some company that Jared has. Now, maybe the Saudis invested in that company of Jared's because maybe it's as solid as the PGA. Maybe it's a blue chip company that's going to give the Saudi investors a whole lot of money, or maybe not.
No, dude, and you bring up a good point, is there's a bunch of stuff we don't know, right? Like, there are reasons why he took those documents. There are reasons why he lied about it. And I want your opinion on this. What do you think we're going to find? Like, wouldn't you be surprised to find out if we get through this indictment and if we get through the trial, which is supposed to start in like a month and a half? And adding on top of that, they're looking at more traitorous, seditious indictments out of Georgia as well, among other things, including stealing millions and millions of dollars through True Social. So Jack Smith is on the fucking scene. But what wouldn't you be surprised to learn from selling documents, from taking in money from Saudis? Like, what wouldn't Charles Adler be surprised to learn when we get through this?
Well, one of the reasons that's a good question is because at this point, can we honestly say that anything would surprise us? I mean, look, some people listening to that tape, I'm not just talking about people who are doing a performative, I'm surprised on CNN or some of the other networks. I mean, I think when people hear that tape today, now, as many of them have just heard it now on this podcast, I think many of them are genuinely surprised. And after being genuinely surprised, they're saying to themselves, I can't believe that anything that Trump does surprises me anymore. And so, you tell me, Dean, is there anything that we find on Trump right now, today, right now, just live in the now, that would surprise Dean Blundell?
Nothing.
Anything.
Nothing from being like paid, like literally in Brinks trucks with money to run interference for Putin, to laundering money for the past 20 to 30 years for Russians, to laundering money for other governments, which apparently is all about Trump Tower. Nothing would surprise me. If he had sold those secret military nuclear secrets to Saudi Arabia for $2 billion for Jared Kushner, literally nothing would surprise me at this point. Nothing.
I have a hard time believing that Donald Trump would do anything if it didn't involve money. So I always had a hard time believing, when it came down that golden staircase, I had a very, very hard time believing that if he was truly serious about running for president, he didn't see it as an opportunity to make a lot of money. And remember when, I don't know if you remember this, because they flood the zone with so much nonsense. Remember when Donald Trump said that he was only going to work for $1? He didn't want to take any money. He didn't want to. The president's supposed to get down to $300,000-$400,000. Do you remember that, Dean?
Yeah. And then he would write these crazy checks with his, like, he made sure people knew that he was sending money to like forestry or sending money to the men and women in the service. Like, it was like half of his paycheck and stuff like that. But he was getting paid. I mean,
does anyone believe that Donald Trump? It's not just making a few $100,000. Does anyone believe that Donald Trump didn't make at least a few $1 billion? At least a few billion.
While he was president?
I mean, serious.
Yeah, dude. And you go back to the taxes that he didn't pay. You remember that report? It was like 2-3 years ago. They're like, oh, by the way, the last year in office, he paid $720 in taxes.
Right.
$720 in taxes. And then they're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's impossible. And he's like, hey, I cheat. That's what I do. And he basically said it. And I'm like, points for him being the asshole we all know he is, right? Like, just kind of right there. He puts it on Front Street. He's like, fuck, of course I cheat. I look for loopholes. Relax.
The thing is that, people want to call him stupid. Okay. I have called him a lot of names. I don't call him stupid, because a person who's really, really stupid, like some of those, is it 101 Dalmatians, 101 candidates for city of Toronto mayor?
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay. So some of them are stupid. Okay.
Yeah. At least 95 of them.
Yes. So I think Donald Trump is at least as smart as most of them, and maybe smarter than all of them. So call Donald Trump a whole lot of things, but he's a serial liar. He's a crook. He's a launderer. He's a thief. He's a cheat. And it's just incredible that he's gotten away with it for as long as he has. But if he has gotten away with it for decades, it's not because he's stupid.
Think he goes to jail?
Wow. He naturally should go to jail, because people who have done a thimble of what he's done have gone to prison. They may
been executed, by the way. Let me add that in there.
I think there's a deal that's there. And I think the deal that a lot of people would sign off on is Donald Trump just riding away from the nomination, from the Republican nomination. In other words, Donald Trump guaranteeing that he won't run for president. I think if Donald Trump guarantees the system that he will stay out of the White House, the system will, take a hard swallow and say, my God, when I think about how many secrets he would have access to, and how much more money and how much more swindling and screwing up the country, it may be worth it. I personally have always thought that was the end game for the system. It was to convince Donald Trump that he's got a choice. He can continue to run for president if he wants to, but if he wants to, he will go to prison. And if he wants to stay out of prison, he stops running for president. I could be wrong. I'm speculating here, but in most cases, the government will offer you a deal if it's in the government's interest. And I personally think that's how this thing ends. I could be wrong. He could end up in the orange jumpsuit. Everyone fantasizes about that. But the political part of my brain tells me that there's a deal.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I've said that several times on this show, where it's like, it's probably going to end with him taking some kind of plea deal where he's like, okay, I'll ride off over there. I'll shut up. I'll get off social media. I'll never run for office again. But I read something yesterday that said if you take the prospective indictments and charges and you couple them with the current ones, he probably stands to spend the next 1,100 years in prison.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, look, if it's the old thing. I mean, if he wasn't Donald Trump, I mean, he's done enough to spend the rest of his so-called natural life in prison. They've got a lot on him, but just what we ran in this podcast. I mean, the Defense Department's plans to attack Iran. I mean, that in and of itself it's just, I mean, I have to say it, the guy's got balls. I mean, I don't know of too many people.
Is it balls or stupidity? Like, I go back to that all the time.
But if Dean, if you had those documents on your possession,
yes,
wouldn't you go out of your way to talk to the best lawyer you could?
Yes.
To find a way to get them the hell out of your possession. That's radioactive stuff. You don't want to be around that stuff.
Not at all. Not at all. To the point where I'm like, you looked at the bathroom pictures where they had put all the boxes in the shitter, and I'm like, that guy is either like incredibly stupid or crazy like a fox. Like he's one of those. Because if it's me, I'm like, I'm calling. If the second those show up and I look in a box and I move back home and I'm putting stuff away, I am on the phone with the FBI going, can you come and get these ASAP? I'm not even going in the room where they are because I'm that afraid. But not him. He's like, hey, everybody, come on in the room. Where's Kid Rock? I want to show Kid Rock this map of this place that I want to blow off the face.
He is. I mean, he is fearless.
Yeah, it's one way to put it. It's one way to put it. I do want to ask you a question because I want to switch gears because something happened this week. We talked about it a couple weeks ago on the podcast. You remember Bell Media pulled this little trick last week where they fired like 1,300 people, 6% of their workforce. Yeah. They escalated that. You and I talked about the human loss. We talked about that. We started out talking about media. I want to finish talking about media because some stuff happened this week that relates to media in this country that we live in, this beautiful country of Canada. And I don't think a lot of people have a look under the hood. You and I have worked for these people for a long time. Yeah. We worked for mainstream media. We worked for regular broadcasters. We were on the radio. We've been in these rooms. We understand the collusion. We understand what the goal of these companies are and that this is self-inflicted. But they don't want to do the business of the business they're in anymore. Not only are they fleecing, cutting, not only are they destroying human lives along the way to trying to figure out where they went wrong, which is every time they turned around, but they put this out this week. And I want to bring this to your attention. Bell Media asked the CRTC, which is the Canadian Radio and Television Commission, which is a joke in itself, to eliminate all local news requirements for CTV. CTV is otherwise known as one of Canada's national broadcasters. Their license exists, and we're given a license to do local news. It is part of their terms of conditions or conditions of license, COL, if you will. It's what it's called. Saying, quote, Bell Media has been losing tens of millions alone in the production and delivery of local news in the 4-year period between 2016 and 2019. The average annual news operating loss was $28.4 million. So I found this interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that we know that that is a dead industry with dead tech that is chasing its own tail. Number one. Number two, Bill C-18, the Trudeau government's bribe to big media. Bill C-18 says, hey, listen, we're going to get a whole bunch of money for you from big tech so that you can start doing local news so we don't have to keep subsidizing you guys because you suck at your jobs. So they're like, okay. Then Facebook turned off the news the other day and they're like, hey, we're not doing that. And now Bell.
Sorry.
No.
Sorry,
please feel free. And now Bell, who wants all that money from Bill C-18 to do news, is saying, by the way, we're getting out of the fucking news business. So what is going on with Bell? How do you see their last 2 weeks, Charles?
Well, first of all, it's hard for me to feel sorry for Bell because Bell is one of the biggest companies in the world, and virtually all pension fund money in this country and all kinds of other relatively safe money is involved in BCE. That's the big conglomerate that owns Bell Media. They can technically say that Bell Media isn't doing wonderful, but Bell is doing great guns. Because, of course, Bell is the phone company, so all of our cell phones, whole bunch of cable and all kinds of businesses that we're not even aware of. BCE is one of the most profitable companies in the world. It's difficult for me to feel sorry for Exxon, difficult for me to feel sorry for Bell. But for Bell Media specifically, to say we want to continue to be in the media game, but we don't want to do local news, or we don't want to do very much national news. We don't want to do very much news. In terms of their behavior recently, they want to fire all the people with experience because, of course, people with experience make more money than people with no experience. So what they're saying is, we want to run a real cheap operation. We want to run a bunch of people who are virtual amateurs in our news department. And by the way, if we could have our way in a perfect world, and can you please perfect the world for us, we'd actually want to have nobody. So at that point, the question becomes, why would they even have a license to do anything? I mean, if all they want to do is repeat U.S. shows, rebroadcast U.S. shows here, why do we need a Canadian company for that? Why? We already pay a ridiculous premium for our cell phones. Because if the telecoms from the States, if the Verizons and the others were allowed to compete in Canada in the cell phone business, our cell phones would be, 60%, 70%, 80% cheaper. Yeah. It would be the same with cable. So my question is, and I guess my question to the government is, if these people don't want to be involved in generating any kind of Canadian content, defending our Canadian culture, as it were, then just let the Americans in, let the free market in. You want to make life more affordable for Canadians? Yeah, make our cell phone service and our cable service more affordable. We don't need Bell Media. Goodbye, Bell Media.
You know what? And I would say to you that that'll never happen, and I'll tell you why. Is because this government, specifically in this country, and we do this all the time. It's like, they somehow have been able to convince people who consume information from Bell, Rogers, Stingray to a lesser extent, Quebec or Post Media, who are all crying foul. By the way, National Post is considering bankruptcy for the 43rd time. But they're all crying foul, and they're crying foul for the same reasons, and it's you and me. And I want to put this up on the screen so you can see it. This is in their applications to actually amend their conditions of their license, which I find very fucking interesting. The requested relief we are seeking would allow us to better manage our regulatory obligations through the evolving competitive landscape of the Canadian broadcasting industry. They own it all, so I don't know how it's an evolving competitive landscape. In the digital media broadcasting undertakings, as detailed in Section 2.1, labeled State of Traditional Broadcasting Industry, the Canadian broadcasting industry, this is from Bell, the Canadian broadcasting industry is in crisis due in large part to a virtually unlimited array of foreign-owned digital media broadcast undertakings. Now, that is the cheapest shit I have ever read in my life, because in the next sentence, in the next paragraph, they talk about having to not do news because it's too expensive, right? And the alternative, as you've pointed out, because they're complaining about foreign news coming into Canada, they want it to stop because it's destroying them, which it isn't. They're lying, number one, because they just do a shitty job of it. That's their problem. But what they're trying to say is, hey, listen, we want out of this game, this news game, but they're also saying, oh, by the way, it's the news game that's killing us. It's the foreign news stuff. So the foreign news stuff is killing us. But that's kind of what we want to do, is just be a repeater for foreign news, because we want to get out of the fucking game.
Right. And if you just want to be a repeater, I don't know why we would want Canadians to pay much. Let's, name the show. Doesn't matter. I mean, I'll name a show for you. I happen to watch The Young and the Restless, which is an American show.
Still?
But if you
still watch that? You watch soap operas?
I've been watching The Young and the Restless for about 40 years.
Okay. Oh my God! Is Victor Newman still on The Young and the Restless?
Yes. Matter of fact, I'm damn proud to have interviewed Victor Newman, Eric Braeden,
I didn't know that.
a number of years ago, and I was doing a Sirius XM show. Yeah, and he's anyway.
Yeah, okay. A quick aside. I got to talk to you about this privately, though. We're going to talk about this all later.
Okay. I'm in my mind, I live in Genoa City. Okay.
Right.
Officially, I'm a resident of Winnipeg, but in my imagination, I live in Genoa City, Wisconsin. Anyway, that's for a different podcast.
Okay,
but I use that as an example because I always want to use true examples. So that's an example of an American show that I watch. Now, I don't need a Canadian repeater to have me watch an American show. I can, if cable was in a different regulatory environment, my cable was no different than the cable that some of my American friends, neighbors, relatives have. I could still watch The Young and the Restless, because The Young and the Restless is not a Canadian show. It's an American show. It's a CBS show. Mm-hmm. And if the Canadian system is forcing me to pay higher taxes and more for cable, blah, 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 because some Canadian companies get this incredible gift, this incredible lottery ticket called a license to repeat American shows, which is most of what they're doing. If they don't want to fulfill the basic obligations to do some Canadian news, whether it's national, local, and some other Canadian content to help our Canadian culture, as you can tell, I'm cynical about that, because I honestly don't think that my feelings for Canada have squat to do with whatever some of these media companies do on television. But putting that aside, I don't need to pay through the nose to get The Young and the Restless. I could get it at a much better price if I could just, as I say, get an American carrier or North American carrier, Swedish carrier. I don't really care. Giving me a decent cable service the same as people have all over, not just the States, all over the world. We pay more for cable, we pay more for cell phones, we pay more for a lot of stuff because a handful of media monopolies licensed by the government are fleecing us. And one of the problems with the story here for Bell Media, I know that they think their PR is wonderful, but one of the problems that they have is that because they put stuff like this out there, it forces people to look at the big picture. And the big picture is, why are we paying so much for cell phones? Why are we paying so much for cable? Do we really have to? Is there anything do those products have any intrinsic value? Is our cell phone service better than the US service? Is our TV service better than the US service? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, dude, it is. And it's ridiculous on its face just by the argument that Bell Media, in this case, is trying to make. And by the way, there were 5 other applications that were put into the CRTC, relief from actually having to pay into funds, which is part of your license, pay into like equitable funds to be able to help people create content in Canada. That's been one of the things that people have had to do as part of their license. So they asked to get out of that. And both Rogers and Bell have asked to not have doing news part of their news licenses, which again is interesting when that is supposed to be the core of your business. And that license is what is going to enable you to actually get money from this big tech bribe that Trudeau's trying to push through and his government's trying to push through, right? Like I find it all so short-sighted. And I also, for the people that don't understand what's going on, it's an unsexy conversation. When you talk about C18 or you talk about what broadcasters are trying to do, what it does to me, and I don't know what it does for you, because we used to work in these businesses, in these umbrellas for these companies. So you and I know how collusive these companies are in a lot of cases. You and I know that these companies don't have values, and I didn't realize it back then. Like when we were getting paid big money from these people, I didn't realize how absolutely, I'm going to use a word that I might get in trouble for, and it's in no way a reflection of my friend Charles Adler. I didn't realize how criminally valueless broadcasting was in this country until I left, and I would say in the last 5 years. But are we just not seeing those values and how they've treated us? Not just about cell phone bills, but about, hiding narratives, stumping for people, telling guys like you and I, hey, when you interview that guy today, don't ask him about X, Y, or Z, because it's bad for his business and he's giving us money to do this interview. So don't talk about the things that people want to talk about. I don't think the average person that consumes traditional media in this country knows how valueless and collusive media in Canada has been and continues to be to a much greater extent. Do you?
Well, here's what I need to say. First of all, I don't see them as, quote, criminally valueless, and I don't have all of the same experiences that you have, Dean. Nobody has told me to not ask this and not ask that. It's never happened. It would be impossible to employ someone like me if they were doing that. So I'm not suggesting that what you're saying isn't true in terms of your own experience, but that hasn't been my experience. My experience is, though, that we're living in an industry, and Bell Media is, as pointed out the last couple of weeks, and other media have done it in somewhat more subtle ways. We're living in an age right now where in many businesses, including media, people who have the most amount of experience are the ones who are closest to getting the boot. And so rather than being rewarded for being a wiser professional, a better professional, a more experienced professional, you're actually endangered by it. And so those are the people that are being shown the door. So if we're talking about values, that to me is not a very, very strong value. That to me is ethically bankrupt. But as far as making the case that there's some kind of criminal collusion going on, and that people on the air who did what I did for many years were forced to ask certain questions or not ask certain questions, on that, my friend, I'm sorry, I can't be an accomplice of yours. I can't be a partner, because that has not been my experience.
No, and you know what? I appreciate you saying that, because the devil's in the details, in the minutia. I have been told not to ask people about
Okay.
certain things because it would be damaging to the money that they give us
Sure.
every month to curate a narrative for their business. I have been told that, hey, we're going to petition the government to get X, Y, and Z out of this because this is what we want as a company, and we're banding together with other companies to do the same thing. And I see it with Bill C-18. But to your point, when I talk about criminally valueless, it's not a literal term. It's valueless to the point where you're like, come on, will you please give us the narrative that everybody wants? Will you stop stumping for a culture and start actually doing news and information that people in this country can count on? Because that's stopped, right? And a lot of narratives, when you talk about what we're asked to do as people, or what we used to be asked to do as communicators, a lot of those narratives were massaged in certain situations. And I go
Right, but
back to
then-
my time at the Fan.
And
Go ahead.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but I am saying this. That's not why they've lost listeners. That's not why they've lost viewers. So let me just be really blunt about this.
Yeah.
You lose listeners and you lose viewers when you are frickin' boring, when you're mediocre, when you're running a formula that's just not interesting, not compelling, not making people want to listen for another 15 minutes or 20 minutes, especially if every 10 minutes they're given 4 or 5 minutes of commercial breaks, never mind traffic and weather together, never mind the same newscast that they heard an hour ago or 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago that they could read for themselves. And you know what? Here's something that's interesting. Many people who read news online don't pronounce the names as badly as so many of the amateurs that are on radio and TV today in Canada. It is embarrassing. And when you embarrass yourself with putting out a mediocre product every day, don't be surprised that you're losing ratings, you're losing people, and you're losing advertisers. You know why you're losing? Because you're behaving like a loser.
Is that a money thing for them? Is that a bottom line thing?
No, that's all about the money. That's all about the money.
Or is it a control thing, or is it both?
No. There's no.
Because they can't control you and me.
There's no boss forcing a 22-year-old to mispronounce the name of the president of Russia. You know, his name isn't Putin; it's Putin.
Mhm.
And that's just one of the most common ones. I mean, the other day I was listening to a newscast. It was a 2.5-minute newscast, and there were 3. And I know I sound like the old man barking at the moon right now. I don't give a damn. If you know, I've been a news director. If my announcer, my newscaster, my journalist, whatever I want to call the person, okay, whatever the official title is on that particular day, but if my anchor can't get through 2.5 minutes of news without mispronouncing the name of 3 different people, it's on me. I'm the asshole.
Mhm.
I'm the person who doesn't know how to train somebody to get in front of a microphone. It's on me. Now, I haven't seen too many people marched out the door because the people they've hired and supposedly trained have been screwing up.
Yeah.
But to think for a moment that this is a subtlety that the public doesn't pick up on this is nonsense, because the public hears lots of different people pronouncing names, and the public knows how to pronounce names. And as I say, if the public is reading something online and knows exactly what they're reading and knows who they're reading about, and then 2 or 3 hours later they're tuning in a radio station or a TV station where the person is mispronouncing everything, basically butchering your attention span. Because once, and I'm just giving you basics here, there are many other mistakes that are made, but I'm just talking about the most obvious ones. When you as a listener or a viewer are clashing, when your brain, your attention span is clashing with a name that is mispronounced, you can't pay attention to the rest of what's being said. You certainly can't take it seriously. You certainly can't believe that the person doing this or the people with the person doing this have been doing a lot of research, a lot of what I would call scholarly journalism. You're just getting the impression that you're getting a bingo caller that has no more interest in what they're reading than the guy at the bingo hall is concerned about. And if you want to put newscasts, national newscasts, local newscasts, whatever, if you want to put them on the same level as bingo at the local church on a Tuesday night, I'm sorry. Why would an advertiser want to pay a premium for that? Why would that make you a large profit center? That to me is, I'm not saying it's illegal. It's perfectly legal to be mediocre, but it's a scam.
Yeah, it is. It is a scam. But this is the thing that they don't say out loud is like, hey, this is about profit taking. We know it's dead tech, right? Like if they had just come out and said, we're just kind of, filling the we're plugging holes in the boat with as many kids out of college as we can. And this is something that guys like you and I both agree on because we've been those guys where they've looked at us and said, you're a big ticket because you're too good at what you do. We can see the end of the road coming for this industry. So what we have to do is profit take, and what we have to do is get you out so that we can squeeze as much out of these entities as we can before the lights go out. Isn't that what we're talking about
Yeah,
here?
that's exactly what we're talking about. That my problem with this, because I'm a member of the public like anyone else. As a member of the public, I want to know why I'm supposed to pay a premium for all this, and I want to know, big picture. I want to know what is it about all this mediocrity that gives me the feeling that I need to have all of this in the environment. I have to have all of this in the Canadian environment to make me feel proud to be a Canadian. There's nothing about listening to a person butchering names and getting facts wrong and clearly reading something they don't understand. There's nothing about that fills me with pride about being a Canadian. It's embarrassing, if anything. Now, I'm not embarrassed as a Canadian, but as a consumer, I end up going to satellite radio.
Isn't that what we do, though? Don't we do mediocrity in media better than any country in the world? Because this all works in the States and Sweden and Switzerland and all kinds of countries all over the world. But we have this ability to, like in Canada, and I believe this to be true, is they do not believe in making stars. And they don't want stars or people who are really good at their jobs to be bigger than the brands that they actually work on. In the United States, let's just lose Tucker Carlson as an example. Say what you like about how much of a shithead he is, but that cost Fox $800 million before they're like, ooh, got to get rid of the star, right? Like here, they're like, 800 grand, 200 grand. Let's get rid of him because more people listen to him. We can't control him. So I think it's a control thing, but I definitely think it is a money thing. But that's how Canada is. Like we're incredibly mediocre when it comes to media.
Well, I'll tell you this, and obviously, I'm not going to mention names because there's no need to do that.
I will. Do you want me
well,
to?
you can. No, I'm not going to mention
names.
I'm not going to mention names on my side because as I said earlier about something else, for all I know, their body is in 3 different dumpsters right now, and some of the names I'm thinking about are no longer in the business, and many of them should never have been in the business. But
all right.
The point is, they're not. It's not like they're doing exceedingly well. They're not all at Monte Carlo right now.
Yeah.
Playing craps. But here's the thing. When I compare the United States and Canada, the one thing that really sticks out to me is I never had a manager in the United States. I never had any of my bosses envy me. I never had any of my bosses try to screw me because I was making more money than they were, because they all understood that if they were paying me decent bucks, it was good for them and it was good for the business. Canada's got this weird tall poppy syndrome, whatever it is, where many bosses, middle managers, upper level managers really don't like the fact that they've got to pay real talent, real money. And they've got this fantasy that somehow they are more valuable than the talent. Yeah. Now, I had certain conversations with certain bosses. I said, okay, you don't think I'm worth it to you? Why don't you sit in my chair? Try to do my show for 3 hours. You know what? Let's make it easier on you. How about just 1 hour? No, maybe just one break. Just do one frickin' break and see if anyone thinks you're a relevant person. See if anyone wants to listen to you for even 5 more minutes. So I don't want to hear your pie hole pontificate on what you think I should be doing and how you don't think that I'm worth the kind of money that I've made, how you think I've shaken you down, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, no American manager treats talent this way. And if there's one reason why Americans know how to make money and do make much more money than many Canadians involved in exactly the same enterprises, it's because Americans understand that it doesn't matter whether it's an NHL team, a TV team, a radio team. If you don't have stars, you don't have squat. And if you're going to have stars, you're going to have to pay them bucks. And if there are people on that team who don't understand that, get them off the frickin' team. Anyone who runs a real team in any business understands that some people are going to be Steve Jobs and some people are going to be without jobs if they don't understand that Steve Jobs is the best thing that ever happened to your job.
Suck on that, everybody. Charles Adler with some high heat to end the podcast. You're right. You're right, because, hey, dude, we see it. We see it in mediocrity. It smells. You can listen to it every time you turn on the radio and you get in your car, every time you watch television, when you're listening to something on the way home and you're like, this is it. Like, I say that to myself all the time. And I listen to the radio like 4 or 5 times a week for like 3-4 minutes. And it's not like I get physically angry, but what I do is I go, and I never get mad at the person trying their best to deliver some type of story or narrative or trying to entertain me, blah, 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 blah. All I hear is fear. All I hear from these people is like, oh my God, I better nail this in 45 seconds or I'm going to lose this job where I get paid $25 a shift. Like, that's all I hear. And so for guys like me and you, who it was a craft, right? It was an art, and it still is to some extent. When I listen to that, I think 2 things. I think, oh my God, that person is outmatched. Get them off the air. They're probably having a fucking heart attack. Number 1. And number 2, I look at those people and I think, who did that to them? Who put them in that position to not only submarine that person's entire spirit, but who put them in a position to submarine the brand that they actually hired them to work on? Because I don't think, and that's the other thing. We hear it, you hear it, the rest of the world hear it. Listening's down across the board. No one gives a shit about traditional media anymore. No one watches television because it sucks unless it's a TV show. No one's watching evening news. No one's downloading the news. They're just fucking watching it on Twitter. But the reason why they're doing it is they're being forced to do it in this country because we suck. Right?
On that positive note.
Crier.co for all your news needs. Go to crier.co. Now, can I get to, when are you launching your podcast, Chuck? When are you launching? Let's go. Let's talk about it.
It's not me. It's my team. I'm waiting. I'm ready to go now, as you can tell. You know, it's not like it's not like I dumped a bunch of nuance in your podcast today. I mean, I'm giving her and I'm giving her. So I just need some of the basic infrastructure. I got the technical stuff. I got the microphone and I got the cameras and I got the Emmy. I got all. I mean, I'm bringing it all, baby.
I know.
So as soon as Crier delivers some of those other things that need to be done, I'm ready to fly.
I got it. Friday, you're gonna have your last brand exercise. Tuesday, we are launching the Charles Adler podcast. And I try to stay out of everybody's way that you're working with, your producer, your executive producer, our branding team. I try to stay out of the way, as you can tell. So it's like, I don't want to get involved in this process because I'll screw it up. But on Tuesday, we are launching, that's a week today, gentlemen, ladies, we are launching Canada's newest, most accountable, entertaining, heartfelt, human podcast, and I am super excited that it's with Charles Adler, and I am very thrilled to tell people it's on Tuesday.
And we're going to have great logos and great brands, and one of the reasons these logos and brands are mugs, hats, you name it, one of the reasons they're going to be great is because I'm one of these people who has 100% respect for people who do things that I do not know how to do. So unlike some of those managers we were talking about, no, I don't tell people who make hats how to make hats. And where did I learn this? At the University of Adler's Tailor Shop. Okay, this store that wasn't any bigger than the set you're looking at right now. So it was a hole in the wall, and there was nothing that turned me off more. My daddy was the tailor, so he took in the pants and the skirts and did all the things to make people look prettier and more beautiful and everything else, more handsome. Okay, and there was nothing that turned me off more than a customer who would try to tell my father how to cut, how to sew, how to take in, how to let out. And I said to myself, and I remember saying to my dad, why don't you throw this customer the hell out? If this customer knew how to do this, he would be doing it, she would be doing it themselves. Why are they telling you what to do? And that's when my father would say, you know what? You ought to be in the radio business. Not my business. Because in my business, I got to pretend to be a servant.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a servant in your business. You just have to speak for a whole lot of people and say things that they would like to say publicly that they for whatever
But can't.
reasons in their life cannot say. So you're speaking for them. But he said, I do not want you speaking for me to the customers, because the customers need to feel that the customer is always right.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've been a radio guy for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time. I can tell you the customer is not always right in the content space. So I'm excited. The Charles Adler podcast a week today. We're going to launch it here at crier.co. Go to Crier Media or crier.co or crier.ca for all your details. Charles, as always, I bid you adieu. Adieu. Is it adieu or is it adieu?
I think it's bye.
Bye.
How about just bye?
Yeah. You've got things to do. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but Tuesday, the Charles Adler podcast launches right here at Crier Media. Great to see you, brother, and I'll chat with you very soon.
Can I just say one thing before we go? Okay, I just want to thank Dean Blundell and his team at Crier publicly for helping to get me out of the coffin. I was perfectly happy to just kind of go away and spend some time in the pasture. And Dean Blundell, and I'll give Brian Jesperson credit for this as well. And I'm hoping that we can get Ryan on some of these podcasts with us as well. But I'd say Ryan and Dean, these are two great Canadian podcasters who have convinced yours truly to not just bark at the moon, but bark at the moon with the camera on. And they don't mind that, I do stand up for myself. And sometimes I'm a little maybe too loud, and sometimes I may be a little too obnoxious. But I think both of them realize that for most people in this country and every country that has given me the privilege to broadcast or podcast, the people know that what I'm saying is 100% from the heart. And more important, when I screw up, when I F up, and I'm told that I've done that, I am the first one to say, you know what, guys, I have F'd this up and I'm sorry.
Accountable human beings. It's what we collect here. That's who we work with at Crier Media, and that is my friend Charles Adler. And I'm very excited for your podcast on Tuesday, brother. And we're going to get Jesperson. He already sent me an email back, so we're going to get him on next week.
Good. Excellent.
Yeah. And he's
the lads will be on the same platform. I love it.
Yeah. We're going to have fun. Good to see you, pal. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dean.
All right. Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen, at Charles Adler. You can find him on Twitter. Everything he does is at crier.co, crier.ca. And at Crier Media, I meant what he said. I mean, we got an opportunity here because everybody else seems to really be interested in screwing it up for you and for themselves. So the opportunity here for us is to bring you people you can trust. Not news you can trust, people you trust that share your perspective. And listen, it's not about left or right here. None of it is. It's not about identity politics. It's not about stumping for liberals. It's not about stumping for politicians. I dislike them all equally. Charles, on the other hand, is more nuanced, much smarter and intelligent, and he's an incredible communicator. So he's going to do a great job of communicating those things with you, but it's always from a human perspective, which is what we're here for. So suck on that today. More announcements to come, but don't forget, again, the Charles Adler podcast starts next Tuesday. Thanks to our friends and sponsors for making this possible as well. Our guys and girls at Cantork, Canada's assembly tool experts, making rugged, hardworking, beautiful torque wrenches, Canada's leading industrial tool experts, giving you the very best in sales, service, rentals, calibration, maintenance, custom fabrication of industrial torque tools, no matter the scale of your bolting project. They have your solution. Colin and his gang are in Canada. They're Canadian made, Canadian manufactured, Canadian designed. Everybody likes to send manufacturing overseas. Not Colin. Not Cantork. They make it here. You can be proud to do business with Cantork if you're in the nuclear industry, the steel industry, railroad industry, the oil industry. It doesn't matter if you're looking for a bolt loosener or fastener and you need a torque wrench that nobody makes. These guys do it for people around the world, and they're proudly Canadian. So hit them up today at cantork.com. Kivlaw defense attorneys, top criminal lawyers, helping you get out of trouble. Whether or not you did it doesn't matter to them. All that matters to them is that you learn from your experience and you get incredible help and get your life back. They know your clients need honest answers about your situation from an experienced defense lawyer, and they know what they're doing. They understand how to fight for you, and they want to make sure that you have a lawyer. His name's Rob Kivlikin. Go to kivlaw.ca for more details, or just email Robert today, robert@kivlaw.ca. And, of course, we're brought to you by GITMO, Canada's best luxury underwear for men with a pouch in the front. Engineered for every level of performance as well as everyday life. If you buy 3, get 1 free right now. If you use promo code GITCH3 at checkout. Lots of colors, and I can't tell you enough. Listen, the unmentionables are very important. It's like home base. You'll never buy another pair of underwear. Get these, put them on you. It'll send you a brand new pair for free when you order 3 or more. Use promo GITCH3 at checkout, GITCH and then the number 3, edsfineimports.com. Check it out today. That is it for us. Have a great day. Thanks to Charles for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow with Lachlan Cross. We'll be back here at 4 o'clock. Lachlan, Douglas, and a mystery guest. Douglas from the True Eager Beaver podcast going to join us to talk about all the fighting. Why is everybody trying to fight the gay community? Why is everybody all upset about a flag? We'll get to that tomorrow as well. Have a great day. We'll see you then. Bye.